Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with you for the 191st, 191 Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We got another full boat today, man. Really jam-packed with incredibly important stuff, including election protection issues in Georgia. We got RAY MCCLENDON going to join us, and JOHN BRAKEY, the great expert on hand-counted, digitally scanned paper ballots. Just tons of issue. We're joined by Professor Marcielle, who's going to talk about, Marcielle Brandlerer, who's going to talk about the youth vote. But mostly we're going to focus in this first hour on just what's happening in Georgia and Arizona with protecting the vote, which is a very, very big deal, as we are seeing in this incredible election, nail-biting at the very least. The second hour, we're going to go deep into environmental issues, especially nuclear power. It's almost hard to say this and not scratch your head or pull your hair out. But there is a serious plan with many, many billions of dollars involved to revive 3 Mile Island. I mean, can you believe this? They want to refire Unit 1 at 3 Mile Island, which opened in 1974, a mere 50 years ago. You know, I got 3 or 4 cars up on blocks in my front yard, pretty much in the same space. So we're going to talk about that with some really great people coming in from Central Pennsylvania. We're also going to discuss Robert Kennedy, who their big piece came out today about Bobby Kennedy and wind power. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. introduced my book, Solartopia, way back when. And here he is. I can't even begin to describe it. We're going to talk about him. But we are going to also talk about the plans to solarize Los Angeles. And we're going to be joined by an incredible, powerful woman who is working to completely solarize the Port of Los Angeles and Port San Pedro. It doesn't get any bigger than that. And I met this woman in the best possible way you can meet anybody. I was at a Bonnie Raitt concert and Thousand Oaks, and Bonnie shouted me out. We've been working together for many, many years. And the woman behind me grabbed me and said, "Look, I was at 3 Mile Island at Penn State when the accident happened, and she is actually the sustainability coordinator for the Port of Los Angeles, the biggest port in America. 40% of our goods come in through the Port of Los Angeles. She has a $250 million deal to clean up Port of Los Angeles. So she'll be in the second hour. And we're also going to discuss, of course, solarizing the Olympics, which is a major coming into LA in 2028. So a full agenda, but of course, we could not have Ray MCCLENDON has joined us. We could not start a meeting like this without a poem from our poet laureate in the wilds of Eastern Oregon, Mimi Gurman. Mimi, you are one of the great activists of our time and also a great poet. What do you got?
Well, hi, everybody. It's great to be back. I love this program and just listening to all of these incredible minds. Y'all help my blood pressure go down. So thanks for that. I wrote a poem that I thought I was going to get a lot of crap for because it's out there. It's an out there concept, unfortunately. It's called After the Walls Are Demolished.
Go for it.
After the border walls are demolished, weeping and with open arms, they run to each other. To each other. You are my sister, uncle, mother, brother, father, auntie. Since the beginning, we have been through the valley of the black-winged bird. Now we are free. Together, we are free.
Hey, I love it. And while we're at it, I want to ask everybody on the call here, how many of you do not have an ancestor that was an immigrant? I'm just curious. I mean, all my grandparents came here in 1900, you know, but and all the Irish came in the 1840s, and boy, they were yelled at. I mean, what Trump's saying about the immigrants today pales before what people said about the immigrants in the 1840s. I love it when somebody named, say O'Reilly screams at immigrants, but we'll let that go. Mimi, beautiful poem. Great way to start us off. Marcielle, can you hold with us for a while? Because we want to start with Ray McClendon, who Ray is our a great genius organizer with Communities United. He's in Atlanta, and he is dealing, and John Brakey's here to back him up from Arizona with some very, very serious attacks on how the election is going to be handled in Georgia and by inference, many other states. I do want to mention very quickly, by the way, the situation in Nebraska, very quickly, very interesting. As most of you know, Omaha has had its own electoral vote. Nebraska, unlike all other states except Maine and Nebraska, all the electoral votes in do not go to a single candidate in Nebraska. They do have an electoral vote for Omaha and then also in the southern part of Maine. But there was talk that they were going to get rid of Omaha's separate electoral vote. Lindsey Graham apparently made a hajj to Nebraska to persuade the legislature to get rid of Omaha's separate vote because Omaha clearly is going to go Democratic. And one state rep who had been a Democrat, who changed to Republican, said he would not vote for it, and he's the deciding vote. So apparently, Omaha is going to keep its electoral vote, at least for the coming week. If it changes, we'll be back for you next week.
Sluggo, real quick, could we get a check-in with Alan Minsky? He has to go in a few minutes.
Oh, all right. Alan Minsky, the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. Alan, you're going to tell us about joining in with the campaign, the Solarizing Olympics, and what else you got?
Well, I'm going to definitely hang out and listen to Ray because I want to hear his take, of course, on Georgia, and I'll be in touch with you too, Ray, about what we'll be doing down there and everything. And just supporting your efforts and Andrea's efforts as best we can down in Georgia. Yeah, my understanding too is there are two other holdouts among the Republicans in Nebraska. So it's not just the one guy, but the one guy has tipped that they needed every vote. So it's looking not bad in Nebraska right now. The reason I just wanted to pop in at the top is if anybody is in the East Bay, on Wednesday night, PDA is co-hosting a screening at the Great Grand Lake Theater, one of the great remaining independent cinemas in the country. And it is Greg Palast's new film Vigilantes Inc., which also, by the way, I would love to have a screening and have Ray McClendon talk about that too. It does focus a lot on Georgia. Very good film, very important film. And it's actually co-hosted by the Tim Carpenter Institute that did 2024 voters calendar. And so we're actually sending out to the PDA email list in the East Bay and up in the Bay Area of getting people to come. We can't actually say it's a co-fundraiser for Palace work and also for our electoral work through the 501c3 because we can't mention that on our PDA emails, but it is for the Tim Carpenter Institute. And we'll have PDA people there with Greg answering questions afterwards. So if you're in the Bay Area, please go let people know about it. And I just put into the chat the sign up form. I'll be back next week because we're actually going to do a national town hall with Greg on Wednesday, and I'll just pop in whenever I can next week and announce that too. But this work you all are doing, it's so important. I think people are starting to catch on around the country, but it doesn't mean that we have the power or the structure yet to negate this absolutely reactionary, racist set of attacks on people's right to vote, to participate in a democracy. And so with that, I'm just going to be all ears for Ray, and I'll be on the call for a while listening in. Okay.
All right, Alan. Great to see you as always. Alan Minsky, Executive Director of Progressive Democrats of America. LYNN FEINERMAN, I believe you're in the Bay Area. Maybe you should go see Greg's movie in the East Bay in Oakland. LYNN has a radio show, and maybe you should hook up with Lynn Finerman, Alan, and talk about the movie with her. Okay, Ray McClendon with John Brakey in the background, and then we'll get to Marcielle. Lynn, were you raising your hand there real quick to say something? No. Okay. Ray McClendon, Georgia is on fire. Tell us what's going on, please.
Well, the state election board continues to be up to their shenanigans. They met on Friday, and they had several rules proposals for an election that's less than 45 days away that they wanted to impose. They received specific letters from the Attorney General's office that the proposed rules that they were putting forward were likely not legal and went beyond the authority of the election board. They were told the same thing by the chairman of the election board itself. Notwithstanding that, they went ahead to consider those rules. Several members of local election boards, and there is an organization of local election board officials that oversee the local election boards, overwhelmingly, almost unanimously came forward to tell them that these rules that they were attempting to put in place made no sense. Nevertheless, they went ahead and passed a rule to hand count all ballots on election night. Now, the problem with hand counting ballots, you might say, well, that's a great idea. Why don't we hand count? Typically, the hand counts are not handled on election night. If there are any discrepancies, they're handled later. What that's going to do is, and this is according to the local election board officials, is going to dramatically undermine the confidence in the count on election night, because you're asking people who have already worked from 5 or 6 in the morning until 9, 10, 11 at night to make sure that they stay there and count these ballots. And if the count is off, they've got to stay until they get it reconciled. So there was overwhelming opposition to doing this. Moreover, of course, we're less than 45 days out from the election, and one of the issues is that who's going to train people to manage this kind of additional workload on election night at this late window. So that's on top of what this election board has already done, where they're giving direct oversight duties to reasonably, quote unquote, reasonably inquire into any item or discrepancy at their whim during the voting process, and potentially hold up certification. So this has the potential to just pour more gasoline onto the fire and continue to undermine voters' confidence in the overall count on election night, specifically election night activities. We remember that in many locations, when Trump was ahead, he called out on social media to stop the count. So this will be another one of those opportunities when votes now in Georgia will be delayed, potentially dramatically into the night. So we see all of these things coming forward now at the 11th hour that is going to potentially create chaos, and we've got to be prepared for it. We're stepping up now to have more volunteers to do poll monitoring. We're going to have to pay more people to be out, not just at precincts and being line monitors and so forth, but actually attending local election board meetings to see how these proposals are going to be implemented over the course of the next 5 weeks. So that's a quick update, and we can go into more detail as we go.
Yes, we will. Ruth Strauss has a hand, but Ruth, can you hold on? Well, go ahead. You're usually brief, and then we'll go to John Brakey. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, hi, Ray. One question I have is, well, first of all, to everybody here, if you want to really come up to speed about Georgia, I mean, Ray's great, but you want to listen to an hour-long interview on the New Yorker Radio Hour with Mark Elias, who is an election lawyer, and his Kamala Harris's, and it's hair-raising what is going on in Georgia. And even Trump congratulated 3 members of the election board when they're 5, and he purposefully left off the 2 that are not in his pocket. Anyway, Ray, are there any places in Georgia where they are saying that even if you mail your ballot before Election Day, if it doesn't get there until after Election Day, it will not be counted? Because I've heard that's going on, and then that calls into question Louis DeJoy. But anyway, is that going on anywhere in Georgia?
Well, I haven't heard of that specifically, Ruth, but what we're telling people already is to vote early in person. Unless you are physically unable to make it to the polls, we're asking people to vote early in person. Those people who have to do an absentee ballot, we're asking them to make arrangements with someone to deliver those ballots to the registrar's office. One of the specific things also that was a part of the voter suppression rules that have passed here in Georgia over the last 2 legislative sessions is that they have dramatically curbed the number of drop boxes. So we don't have as many drop boxes as we had before. There are also rules about quote unquote harvesting of ballots, meaning that someone that specifically is not a family member cannot deliver someone else's ballot. So there are all of these hurdles in place in order to suppress the vote.
Wow. John Brakey, you and I have been fighting since 2004 for hand-counted, hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots. And then you introduced the technology of digital scanning, which completely changed the landscape. I'm just curious, Ray, are they digitally scanning the hand-marked paper ballots in Georgia?
We don't have hand-marked paper ballots. What we have is a digitally scanned ballot that we receive. So when we do our voting on a machine that then spits out the ballot itself, and then that ballot is read by a scanner. So you physically yourself have to put that you have to physically insert your own ballot into the scanner and confirm that it was counted.
Well, how do you vote by mail then?
Well, it's different for vote by mail because the vote by mail goes directly to the registrars.
But if you get a ballot in the mail, you have to hand mark it, don't you?
Yeah, but that's a totally different process.
Okay.
It's a totally different process.
But they're both digitally scanned. I mean, the scanners,
yeah, they'll be digitally scanned, but
they're digital and they create an image, is what they do. And that's very important because redundancy is very important. And that image is also will trace back to the original ballot in the log. Okay. And to me, you look at what's going on. It's like this thing I have up there on the board, goes into the fact that the absence of transparency in election is eroding trust over time. And what these people want to do, they shouldn't be able to do because it's too early before. But I want you to know in Arizona, they're not talking about let's hand count and see how many votes the president. What they want to do is count how many ballots were cast at that precinct or that location that night as a verification. And of course, they're going to have the machine is going to tell them what it is anyway. Do you see what I'm saying?
Correct. Correct.
It's kind of like they're trying to, show how bad maybe the other side really is because of not letting this. We have. I work with both sides, and I am a progressive Democrat, and I am not with Trump, but I am very fearful of the cult that's out there, how badly we're divided. And if you really kind of study this thing, November could turn very, very violent. And this slide, getting back up what I have here, the 2020 election message from the right wing, it was rigged and it was a childish frame. Their attitude now is this: a non-audible election bears the full prescription of fraud. And what we're doing is check marking and giving them things that they can argue about. And, I'm a strong believer in this. The problems in elections are complicated, but my God, the solution is simple. It's called transparency. And that transparency is the currency of trust. And then knowing that these digital images, hey, all I need is 2 records to analyze an election. I need the cast vote record database, and I need the ballot images. Dane County, Dane in Florida, in Wisconsin, 303,000 voters, 303,000 ballots for 249 precincts. I was able to create in less than an hour 249 separate precincts with hyperlinked images in there. And we're hoping someday to get precinct men and women, both parties, to be able to go ahead and audit it. They don't have to count everyone. They can count one row. One person reads what the ballot says, and then the other person checks marks off in that row in the cast vote record database. And by the way, this program we built, all we did was develop macros, and we're using Microsoft Excel. And they spent a lot of money building this thing, and I've been using it for 30 years. We know what buttons to put to hyperlink all of this stuff and make it extremely audible. And I think that could be done. And that's what I see. And we built it for the public, not for the election.
Okay, that's the ABE system that you presented last week. Ray, how are the votes going to be audited in Georgia? Is there a process? Are they going to use the digital? If every ballot is scanned, are they going to take a vote count?
Look, I'm not an expert on that, so I don't want to try to get in the weeds.
Okay.
On all of that, but I'm dealing with the political and the perception problem that is being created to create the chaos. There are forensic auditors and other auditors within the Secretary of State's office. Here's a takeaway from our perspective at Communities United and many of the grassroots election organizations. Although Raffensperger and his office represent are part of the Republican establishment, we don't have as big a concern as some other states do with the Secretary of State's office. Now they do have some problems, but one of the things that we know is that many of the processes for confirming the count and for certifying the election are statutorily required, and he is the state officer responsible for doing that. And there are as I said, statutory checkpoints in place from November the 12th this year, which is when certification is going to be required. And any issues that come up with the election are in his hands and his office's hands to take care of. I mean, one of his guys got famous in 2020 about the fact that he came on and he's a tech geek, that's dealing with a lot of the stuff that Brakey and others are dealing with to confirm all of this stuff. The problem that I'm having, what we're zeroing in on is that these local election board people who are on these boards and the poll workers that they have are not equipped to deal with the problems at hand that are going to get created in order to present chaos, to present confusion, and erode confidence. That's the big takeaway that we have from a policy standpoint. It's trying to be handled by the wrong people in the wrong way, which is going to erode confidence.
Also, my understanding from last week is that if a single local election board refuses to certify, the whole state can't certify. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so what we said, and we went back and looked. I went back and looked at again. There's a procedure. The state law requires them to do it by the 12th of November. Requires them to do it by then, and then it's up to. And then the state has a series of days and tests that they have to go through to roll up all of the certifications so they can meet their state legally mandated date to certify the overall elections, which then gets us to the point of ensuring that the electors, the presidential electors for our state can be confirmed. Those are the big takeaways that we have, that those dates that first start with November 12th and then roll into a number of processing dates for the state to roll up all of their procedures for confirming and certifying are going to be delayed in a ripple effect based upon these activities that the state election board is taking. That's the big takeaway here.
So you seem to have a situation where the state election board could be at odds with the Secretary of State and mass chaos.
And the Attorney General.
And I assume the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, are they on the same page or not?
Yeah, they're on the same page. On Friday morning, they received a letter from the Attorney General saying that their proposed rules likely were illegal and exceeded their authority. And so did the Secretary, so did Raffensperger, the Secretary of State. And those same three people that Ruth mentioned, that Trump talked about from a rally, from the stage of a rally, were the three votes that voted in favor of going forward with that rule.
Oh man, what do you anticipate? I mean, is this going to be total chaos, and then they're going to go, national and say, "Well, we can't certify"?
Well, folks like Mark Elias, who is now representing the Harris campaign, and other lawyers are on top of this. I mean, because it's become a major issue, not just statewide, but nationally. And so there are folks that are going to be on it. But nevertheless, the board went ahead and passed the rule. So this is something now that the local election boards are having to deal with today as they prepare to train their poll workers. Now, remember, we're already losing poll workers because of the shenanigans that went on in 2020. Seasoned veterans, folks like Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman are no longer doing this because they were harassed, and they don't get paid that much anyway. Now you're adding more work, and there's threats and intimidation. So you're losing people who actually knew how to do this. You're going to have to train new people and then train them on extended policies and procedures as well for what will be the most contested election we've ever had.
Well, let
So
me ask you this, and then
it's ripe for chaos.
let me ask you this, and we'll go to our questioners. But if a local election board gets a directive from the Secretary of State and another directive from the election board, and they're in conflict, who do they listen to?
It doesn't work that way. So it doesn't work that way. So the local election boards, they have a certain set of rules that they have to conform with to roll up information to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State was specifically removed from this board because he wasn't MAGA enough. So now they have not only made up additional rules, but they are likely violating the law. The Attorney General has stepped in, as I said, but they haven't stepped in as forcefully, in our view, as they should. So a part of our strategy is we want to support those groups that specifically are going to be challenging these rules, challenging the slowing down of the process, if it violates any of the state law mandated dates upon which the voting process is supposed to be completed and certified, and the dates upon which the state is supposed to then take over and roll up the different batches of county certifications and follow-up procedures. So those are the things that we want to focus on. In Georgia, there is I'll see if I can find it for you. There is a very good background on this that was put out by one of the citizens in ethics organization in conjunction, I believe, with the Brennan Center, that goes through the details by state. And they did an excellent review on Georgia of what the process will need to be. And it's going to end up in the courts. There's a way to deal with this, we hope, but that's what it's going to boil down to. So having folks like Mark Elias on point will be very important.
Unbelievable. Really amazing. Well, I wonder how many other states are going to be similarly afflicted. That's key. I mean, we know this is going to happen in Georgia. Will it happen in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada?
Arizona, yes. This is Brakey again.
Please,
we
quickly.
had a big fight about the 100,000 people they tried to purge because they registered to vote before the law was changed and they hadn't had proof that they were an American citizen. And fortunately, we did that. Our problems, Ray, what's going on in Georgia and what's going on in Arizona, our situations are really different when it comes to what happens on election day because it's pretty much worked out. Plus, our people are more professional. They're elected. These are board of supervisors who ran for office and they have a staff and they also get paid. And all they want is, please give me evidence to prove to the wackos that it was real. You know what I'm saying? That's what they're kind of hoping to do.
You're going to have digitally scanned hand-marked paper ballots in Arizona, and then the digital scans.
The whole state is.
And
But,
then they'll read the digital scans. They'll read the digital scans and have a preliminary outcome. But that's not the case in Georgia. So, God, and who knows about these other swing states? I believe North Carolina, we've heard, is much more orderly. But we'll have to see. We know they had a big fight already. We had this on our show a couple of years ago. They had a big fight in Nye County, Nevada, about hand counting paper ballots. And again, the Republicans were in favor of that, and the Democrats were opposed. It was really interesting. So God help us on this one, boy. Ray, we're glad you're there. And we see you've already pulled your hair out, but nonetheless, this is going to be we're going to keep having you back to explain what's going on here. It's devastating.
I just sent Mike.
Please, Ray, go ahead.
I just sent Mike something that he can share with folk. There's an election. It's called Election Certification Under Threat. that just came out from Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. And these guys are fairly reputable. Some of you may have heard of them. And they go through the critical battleground states that have all of this shenanigans going on. And they start off, John, with Arizona. So
Yeah,
if you
of
could
course.
share that with everybody.
Can you put in the chat the name of the organization or the link?
I sent it to Mike.
Oh, okay, Mike, if you can post it up, that'd be great.
And I would urge you to read your states, for those who live in these battleground states, to read that, and it'll give you a great background on how we're going to have to legally deal with some of these issues going forward. I didn't read every state, but I read Georgia's, and it was very on point for some of the things that will be going on here. And I did look up the date. The state of Georgia, by law, is required to certify, the state is required to certify all of the races by November the 22nd.
Oh, that's
Okay.
The election day is what, November 5th?
November 5th. So local election boards by November the 12th. And then the 22nd, 10 days later, the state has to do the entire roll-up. And that's by law. And so when you read this analysis that I just shared with you, the lawyers will be frantically moving to push to the side all of the chaos agent issues. And if the local election boards don't certify, then there'll be lawsuits filed to remove those officers and to put in an official who will actually certify on behalf of that local election board, so that the state then will have its position, will be able to conform to its statutory guideline of November 22nd.
All right. Well, as they say, from your lips to God's ears. Marilyn Bernstein, did you want to jump in here, Marilyn? Let me get you unmuted here, I hope.
I'd like to jump in
There you
real
go.
quick, Harvey,
Yeah.
if I could. Oh, go ahead, Trish.
I was going to ask, Ray, so you mean when you're doing the hand counting, you're counting the votes, not just the ballot, right? Because in Brookline, we count the ballot. We just make sure we have.
They want to do a reconciliation to ensure that the ballots and the number of people that showed up match.
Oh, so just, they're not checking how they voted, just the.
They're not checking how they voted.
Yeah, we did that in Brookline, and we'd usually do it, that part in 20 minutes or half an hour, but maybe they need smaller precincts. We
Well, they
also,
got 100.
Yeah,
It's done in a lot of places.
Yeah.
what?
And but it's too late to make the change. That's what it really comes down to.
correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mimi Gurman.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they have in Georgia the same thing we have in Oregon, which is can somebody mute? Can you all mute?
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, cool. In Oregon, it's a little bit different because it works, but also because we have mail-in ballots, and we are notified as soon as our ballot gets looked at, and then we're notified again, like received, and then we're notified again when it's been counted. And I was just wondering, does Georgia have that, or?
That I don't know. I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
It'd be great for people to.
John, what about Arizona? Is there Arizona?
Well, we have a great tracking system. It really is pretty incredible. In fact, it causes problems because it's so good, because people think that every time their ballot winds up someplace, they, oh my God, they got my ballot in the post office. Oh, it's over here now. It's in the recorder's office. Oh, it just got counted. They think their name is on the ballot, and it's not. So it makes it hard to get images, because people say, oh my God, if Brakey gets my ballot, he's going to know how I voted. And that's crazy, okay? And but I do want to make another point. It's very important because, last Friday I did a webinar by a guy named Professor Robert Pate, PhD, professor of political science, And this webinar was called Political Violence and the Election, Assessing the Threat from the Left and Right. And this guy was profound. He had stats, statistics, and I came out of this thing feeling a little less crazy because I see big problems. And I've been in many states. I know a lot of people on the right I'm tracking. I know who the grifters are who are out there spreading propaganda and leading people, and how divided this country is, that I'm scared for
Well,
it.
put the link to that.
I will. No, I'm going to put some links out there, but please. And then other people realize this. If you know about Microsoft, you've used it, you've used Excel, download my beta, run it yourself, because it was built for people to be able to audit their own elections. There's a small precinct. There's a county from Maryland with 6,600 votes. You'll create 24 precincts. The data is there to check, and you'll see how simple it is, because like I said, the problems are complicated. But God damn it, the solutions really are that simple. It's called transparency, which is that currency of trust that we need to bring us back together. Thank you.
All right, John, thank you. Steve, you don't have to edit out that curse word. Leave it. It's fine. LYNN FEINERMAN. Oh, you were unmuted. Now you're not. Let me get you unmuted. Then we'll go to Tatanka and Steve CARUSO.
Hi, thank you. Sorry about the background noise. I wanted to ask Ray. Ray, how are these people who are actually doing the counts now being chosen? If people like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss have been made an example, shall we say, is MAGA also trying to infiltrate that part of the election process in Georgia?
Yes, yes, they are. And they have also been active in changing the rules so that they are closer to election workers, so that potentially they can be intimidated. There will be more and more threats and intimidation this year than in the past, and therefore many of the election boards are finding it difficult to recruit poll workers and poll monitors. So that's a huge problem here in Georgia, and I suspect around the country.
Can't hear you, Harvey.
That's an answer we didn't want to hear, but that's the way it is. Tatanka and then Steve CARUSO. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, I just want to throw this back to Ray, make it understandable for people who haven't been on these calls every week. Thank you for that information on citizens' responsibility for ethics, and for Michael Eisen, the attorney, tried to head it off at the pass. But if you can just take people through this process is meant to create such chaos, such numbers of ballots to certify that they can be they are like wolves in sheep's clothing. Oh, we're just trying to get through and verify. We don't have enough time, so we can't certify. Can you just explain that? That really is understandable then.
And you're absolutely right, Tatanka, and you make a great point. You're listening to somebody who has been hardened by having to deal with this now for the last 4 years with 2 major voter suppression bills, and then this whole wave of MAGA. And bear with me for a minute here. We got to remember that a lot of this stuff has started with Steve Bannon and others when they decided that they were, after losing in 2020, that their strategy was going to shift. It was going to shift from trying to control stuff at the federal level to they knew they had to be embedded at the local level. And they started embedding themselves in school boards and other local boards. And one of the areas that they chose was local election boards. And so they started putting these MAGA election deniers, running them for these positions when they were elected, or getting them appointed. Here in Georgia, those positions are appointed. So they have taken the time to remove those Republicans who understood their duties and were trying to be responsible, to now you have these zealots who are in place in many of these areas. Rolling Stone did a piece and found that there were almost 100 of these election deniers on specific boards of election in swing states. And that's what they have been working hard to do. They have been threatening people at local election boards and now here at the state board for the last 18 months, in addition to the state laws that have been changed to further suppress the vote. So when we look at this, we know that there are legitimate people, and I would say on both sides, there are legitimate people who want to make sure that only people who are eligible can vote, whether it's on the left or the right. But we know that these election deniers will never be about anything but refusing to support certification or to have any votes that don't conform to their MAGA agenda that starts with Donald Trump. So that's what I'm up against, which has nothing to do with whether or not somebody that we might be more transparent if we have hand counts or use a different kind of machine or some other process. I leave that to the experts like John Brakey. What I'm dealing with here is that all of that all of that is subterfuge from 99% of these MAGA folk. They are not interested in transparency. What they are interested in is fomenting chaos in order to give Trump what he needs to get the vote overturned and either not certified and therefore overturned and thrown either to the state legislature here in Georgia or some other process that will allow for his minions to be able to steal the election.
So is it
I'm
fair?
trying to keep my eye on that prize.
So is it fair and clear to say that this is clearly KKK in coats and ties with a more subtle message, more subtle way of doing it, where they say all we're trying to do is certify. We are defending the Constitution by this. They're trying to get themselves in that position by doing all this dirty stuff to flood the zone with things, with votes that don't need to be certified.
Which is exactly right, which is what Bannon said years ago when he said flood the zone with crap, and he used another word. And then they won't know, and that's another part of the fascist playbook, right? Make sure that nobody knows what the truth is. So the only thing you can believe is what we tell you. So since nobody knows what the real facts are.
Yeah. So we need to, in this group, we need to find a way to create this message to get it out to enough people to support the attorneys that are doing all they can to try to head it off at the pass. The danger is that the law takes time and it may end up at the Supreme Court. I don't know. Will they have time? Will the chaos go beyond these dates? And then we get to November 20th. And even though we've won the election, the Democrats have won the election, it never gets to that point because it goes to the states. That's what we're facing, right?
That's exactly what we're facing. And we're sounding the alarm now. As I've said in past calls, we weren't really paying this any attention before. In 2020, we had our eyes on first winning the general election. And then as many of you recall, we had 2 Senate runoffs. So between November and January the 5th, we were concerned with turning the vote back out for that. So we were all popping champagne on the evening of January 5th. And then we woke up to January 6th because we just didn't have our eye on the ball of all of the shenanigans going on to undermine the process of certification and forwarding forth verified official electors. Yeah. And now they have zeroed in on that. They know that that is a weakness in the system and they plan to exploit it. And the difference now is they have people on these boards embedded with hardened positions that are prepared to do what the state election board did on as an example on Friday, which over the objection of the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, they still passed a rule that would help to create this chaos. And to Tonka's point, they passed the rule saying, oh, well, we just want to make sure that it's fair and that everybody know that the votes are tabulated correctly. And that's all we're trying to do. And shouldn't everybody be for that?
So the last comment is, in 2020, we were focused on the vote, and then January 20th, that's where the insurrection was. This time, they're making their stand at the local level so that by the time it'll never get there.
Right. It'll never get there.
Right.
Well, unreal. Really, and thank you for this brilliant exposition, Ray. Very, very clear.
Thank you, Ray.
Steve CARUSO in Ohio.
Yeah, we went over this before. Now, used to be a 5-day deadline, and if these guys didn't certify the election, then they would get tossed out. The people would get tossed out of their position. Is that not happening anymore?
No. So that's still the state law. So here's what the problem. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing was that if they don't finish the hand count, then they can't hand the cards over to the state with the totals. So they're like preempting, the state by declaring a local rule if they want. So go ahead, Ray. I hope you didn't lose your thoughts.
No. So I encourage everybody to read that CREW report. And it deals with some of the state law issues. So statutorily, they are required to do November 12th. The local election boards are required to certify by that day. This is not optional. It says they shall certify. But we know that, and they've already started the process. We know, John knows in Arizona that there have been people who just didn't certify, even though their state law did, and we've had the same thing here in Georgia to just not certify elections. All right, but they were local elections or other things, but they were prodding and testing the system. So we know that there are going to be some who are going to vote against certification, and in some cases they will have enough votes to be the majority to stop certification. So that's when the legal process will kick in, because state law requires them to do that. And but there are certain legal processes that I'll let you read the CREW report to see how that all shakes out. Because the point is that by November 22nd, all of that should be rolled, all of those local certifications, the 159 across the state, should be rolled up to the state so that the state can certify. Now, what happens when all of this stuff ends up in court? There'll have to be briefs. There'll have to be arguments, motions, all kinds of things, and then it's ultimately going to end up in the state Supreme Court. I don't see any process where that can get done in 10 days.
So even though they're legally required to certify, if they don't have an actual vote count, they're going to say, "Well, we can't do it." And
They need
then
to-
it goes into the
No.
court
What they're
system.
going to say? Let me say this, and then I'll go to Steve. What they're going to say is to Tatanka's earlier point. What they're going to say is, Judge, Your Honor, we're just trying to make sure we have free and fair elections, and we have some issues here. That Granny called us and said that she saw somebody standing by a drop box, and we thought they were putting something else in the drop box, or they were trying to get in it. And she videoed it, and we have the video. So we want to review this video, and if that would happen at that drop box or at that location, then we just need time to go through all of this and make sure there are no issues. We're forgetting about how many different lawsuits got brought by Trump and how many of those were based on bogus affidavits of information that had to ultimately be proved false but now you have the color of an official of the government, of the local election board making these representations before the court and saying we at least need to have time to go through this stuff. All right. That's what is going to be the difference this time around.
Wow. Wow.
So
Man.
there's certain
All right, well,
procedures
listen,
that
we've got it explained here. I mean, people, there's forewarned is forearmed. We got to deal with it.
there's certain procedures
Steve
at the
Caruso?
polling places that they have to follow. I mean, even putting flags out and the presentation and a certain way that do things. In Ohio, I don't know if that's true in Georgia, but then you have to reconcile the signing book with how many votes came out, that both numbers match and so forth. So all this stuff is done ahead of time. All these guys are trying to do is find some little crazy loophole to create some distraction, and it's like, we're done with it. Somebody's got to start putting their foot down, and justice has to be done. And these people should be shaking their boots to even think about playing with people's votes, because it's what's better than money is your vote. This is more expensive. It's more. I'm doing a thing here, but you get my idea, right?
Yeah,
John Brakey,
John
you're muted.
Brakey, and then we're going to move on and let Ray off the hook. John, you're muted, I think. You are. Go
I'm
ahead.
unmuted now.
Yeah, go ahead,
What I
please.
think is that it's going to get crazy and nasty. My God, they got, our Secretary of State Font that said to me, John, I can't endorse A because I have to get lawyers and everybody, but these election departments, okay, and their board of elections, they could use the digital, but they cannot touch the ballots, okay? And basically, buy a separate computer, put it in the corner, okay? And then take that data, run it, break it down to precincts, and just audit a couple of precincts. These people need proof to go back to their people. The counties that had a lot of problem in my state, they were the most Republican counties in the state. And grifters went in there from the audit and really worked them really hard. These are good people who believe stupid things and believe things, and some of you can't change it, but some you can. Okay, we have to try, or we're going to be. It's got to be ballots over bullets.
Yeah, well, you stopped them in Arizona. I'm glad you're in touch with Ray, because we got cross-state pollination here, and we really got to see what's going on. Ray, what a great presentation, clear as a bell. Everybody, we all know what we're up against. The point is, what else is happening in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada? We don't know at this point in time. It seems that Georgia is the most vulnerable, but in the future calls, we're gonna get people from the other states, including Ohio. We have Steve Caruso with us, who'll give us a report. But Ray, is there anything else you want to throw in before?
Just one final point.
Please.
We found out from some reporting that since July, under the new statute, one of the voter suppression statutes, there have been over 45,000 requested voter purges, voters to be purged in just four metro counties, 45,000 since July. Only 50 of the challenges were upheld. So you had 50 out of 45,000.
Wow.
So that just goes to show you again that the change in the law, what we're battling here is voter suppression, guys. Don't get it twisted with anything else. It's not about fairness. It's not about transparency. It's not. The only thing it's about is voter suppression. They're trying to undermine the entire voting process in order to deliver the results that they indeed want, in order to have an autocratic regime in the United States. So I just want everybody to stay focused on that.
Beautifully spoken, Ray. I mean, and incredibly important what you're telling us here. So thank you for that. And we're going to continue coming back. We're going to try and get people from other additional states with John. And we got Georgia and Arizona pretty well covered. but we need to know what's going on elsewhere. So Ray, we hope you'll continue coming back. Thank you so much.
You're
And John
welcome.
Brakey, thank you
My
too. I
pleasure.
mean, this is completely unique and incredibly powerful. So thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you. We're at the top of the hour. We're going to go to Marcielle Brandler, and then I want to come back to Steve CARUSO if we can. Marcielle, can you give us 5 minutes on your report? You're a professor. You've written many books, and your topic is about voter turnout. So let's hear it. And then
Well,
we're going to go, by the way, to 3 Mile Island and to Bobby Kennedy and also to Solarizing Los Angeles. That's next on the agenda. But Marcielle, please.
yeah, so we talked about the young people. I teach college English, and I try to stick a little bit of information in there for my students. Like today I said, guys, you got to vote. You got to register to vote, even pre-register. And I wrote on the board, vote 411, which is the League of Women Voters. So I am a member of the League of Women Voters in Pasadena. And they, a couple of years ago, I asked my students, how do you get your information? And they said, a lot of them said TikTok. And it was like, what? How do you get your news on TikTok? And then they said that news organizations information, I guess, kind of pops up. And then apparently they see something that's interesting to them, and then they'll look it up. So if an MSNBC blurb comes on their TikTok, they will supposedly look it up. And I've noticed something very important. Young people are not necessarily apathetic. They are not informed. And I have to say, this is heartbreaking. I've mentioned it to several classes. I talked about January 6th, and there was silence. And I said, do you guys know what January 6th is? Nothing. How many of you know January 6th? Nothing. So I showed them the film, and they were all like oohing and awing, oh my God. So, and I remember when I was young, I didn't know anything. And so it's not that they're apathetic, it's they don't know. And I remember when I was young, my parents were Republicans, so I voted for Nixon. It's my fault he got in. And so, of course,
We've been
now,
looking for the culprit for a long time.
there you go, blame me. So I'm tweeting and sending messages to the media saying, you guys need to be like England. You need to be more blunt. And I tell my students, you have a voice. It's very important. Use that voice. Express yourself. It doesn't matter if I agree or disagree in your essay. So I support whatever you say. As long as I get a good essay out of you, that's the important thing.
Well,
And
the one question I think on everybody's mind is how big a difference will Taylor Swift make? I mean, are these kids, there's a whole lot of media hype about the importance of her endorsement, and there was apparently a major spike in registrations among young people.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that trend? Is there anything real
I
to
think
that?
there is. And I looked up who are the news publishers with the biggest followings. And it said that on TikTok, this is from 2023. They said that TikTok following has grown by 20 times in 9 months.
Jesus.
This is the BBC News, has the highest rating. Then the next one is the Evening Standard, Healthline, Yahoo, UK. And I think that the young people, they love their musicians. And I did not ask them about Taylor Swift, but I think it does make a huge difference that their beloved musicians or favorite musicians. I heard yesterday, I think it was, that a lot of people, oh, it was my neighbor. She said a lot of people dropped Taylor Swift, that her membership online has gone down among certain people who
Right,
are against her. But I think having the courage to do it, put it out there,
right.
is making a difference.
Well, I think there are two classes of people who dropped Taylor Swift. Number one would be Republicans and MAGAs, and number two would be people who don't root for the Kansas City Chiefs. But be that as it may, they released, and I would urge people to watch this. The Miss Americana is the Netflix documentary about her, and I found it fascinating. I mean, she's really something else there, Taylor Swift, and she's very smart and knew what she was doing. So it's inevitable that some people would drop her. But the spike in young people voting, and of course, the Democrats have a massive lead among young people, and they could clearly make the difference in this. Marcielle, you've written a number of books. Just give us a final opinion here on what's going to happen with young people in this election. Then I want to go to Steve Caruso, who's actually within 50 miles of Springfield, Ohio, to give us kind of a report of what's going on in Ohio. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I can't predict. I didn't know that you wanted to ask me all that. And I tried to do some research to fill in the blanks. But I think it's really important that we push our young people to pay attention, at least on, one topic at a time, something simple. Don't overload them. I think, a lot of people think that their vote doesn't count. My students of color or my LGBTQ students, they're really scared. And they're very, especially since COVID, they're very humble, they're very sweet. And we need to push them and show them respect. Listen to them when they say an opinion and then support it. But I don't know statistics about how many young people are going to vote. I didn't really look that up. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. We don't know for sure either, but the polls do indicate the major media has been reporting that young people, since Taylor Swift's announcement, are really fired up. I mean, it's kind of weird, we have essentially won the marijuana issue, which used to excite people. Although
Yeah.
that was a double-edged sword because a lot of the marijuana advocates were too stoned to go out and do anything. But now, of course, it's the big abortion issue. Thank you for that, Marcielle. We really appreciate it. And do come back, and if you got more to report on with that group, it'd be really great. I want to talk to Steve Caruso now. Then we're going to go in and talk about 3 Mile Island and Robert Kennedy, who I have a personal situation with this. Bobby introduced my Solartopia book many years ago, and there's a piece around now from the wind industry that's really pissed at him. But Steve Caruso, you're in rural Ohio, and we have a situation, this thing in Springfield, Ohio. The great irony is that the Republican governor of Ohio is no progressive, Mike DeWine, actually invited these people to Springfield. Do you want to talk about that a minute?
Yeah, it's just like anything else they're offered. I'm sure that the Department of Immigration in the United States said, we have these people, they're seeking asylum. We've got numbers here that need to settle while their case is being looked at, and they're legal aliens. They're people, whatever. Here they are. This whole thing blew up with Vance supporting Trump's crazy notion that they're illegal aliens. They're not illegal aliens. They're people. We have people from Nepal here. We have people from Somalia. It's the biggest Somalian population in the country in Columbus, supposedly. It was just made a big nothing, and the whole thing was to distract from Trump's failure in the debate with Kamala. That was the whole deal right there. And so let's distract them and see how things turn out, right?
Well, what has DeWine actually come out and said
He-
about all this? I mean,
He's given $2+ million to Springfield to help deal with the influx after the fact, after all this popped up. Oh, they're eating pets. There's a guy in Columbus, Ohio, found a dead goose on the side of the road and he was disposing of it. Somebody took his picture and then the right wing got a hold of it and blasted all over the place. Look what they're doing in Springfield. They're killing geese. No, sorry, not happening. So every chance they get, they try to twist, bend, deflect, and step outside of the law in order to create this narrative that there's chaos, and there isn't. So let's get off the chaos bandwagon here and get back to reality, folks.
well, Trump is threatened to come to Springfield. You know, he'll drive right by your house, of course.
He's going to
What do
fly
you?
over my head. I got the runway going right over the
So what
sky,
is
right over.
how do you think people in Ohio are going to respond? And then
Yeah,
Sandy, you're in Columbus, so we'll get to you.
the mayor doesn't want them to come. It's too much of a distraction. They got too much to deal with as it is. With the guys, you had the Proud Boys out there. You got people protesting, handing out Nazi flyers, KKK flyers. Yeah, why? And leave Ohio alone. Leave us alone. You're not going to make us you. So get off. You know what I'm saying?
Wow, amazing. That Steve, by the way, lives in a town called Pataskala, which is right outside Columbus. Sandy, you're in Columbus. What do you think? What from being on the ground there?
Yeah. Oops, sorry. I turn this off. The thing the one thing about Governor DeWine, he does have a special relationship with Haiti. I haven't quite figured it all out. I don't know if you haven't clued, Steve, but something about his daughter. She died in a car crash 20 something years ago. I don't know if she was going to Haiti on missions or whatever. I have no idea, but it started with that. He and his DeWine and his wife have made these connections with Haiti and are helping people. So for some reason with the Republicans, they have to have a special connection in order to actually figure out maybe they should act on those people's behalf.
Called reality, right?
Yeah.
Sandy, sorry to
Well, one thing about Mike DeWine, I've never been a fan, but unlike so many other MAGA people who posture being religious, Mike DeWine is genuinely religious. And he has 11 kids. So, and his heart does seem to be, also he grew up, I think in Yellow Springs. I mean, he grew up near or in Springfield. So he's very well aware of the locality there.
Well, the other thing I would say is that, I'm in Columbus, next to Ohio State and all that. So I realize I might be a little bit, in a special world, but it does seem like around Ohio, people are not falling for it. But what happens is, like I saw a Guardian article entitled, "First came the Haitians and then came the KKK." I mean, they will look for these things. They're finding these things. And last thing I'll say is, I really don't like how the Democratic Party, Harvey, how strong Ohio is. It's definitely at least 50-50. But the Democratic Party has just given up on Ohio. It's a big mistake. I feel like if they came here, instead of just just throwing it up in the air, that would be a really good plan for them. But because most people are not believing this thing, but it doesn't matter. The KKK get the news.
Yeah, well, the Democratic Party, of all the things, I lived in Central Ohio for 50 years, and always the most disappointing thing about Ohio has been the Democratic Party.
Oh.
I mean, they're just, I mean, they give the term lame new dimension. I mean, we had two great senators who came from Ohio. John Glenn was a great senator, and Howard Metzenbaum was a great senator. And now look what we got. Well, Sherrod Brown's a great senator, and they're they're just not even bothering. I mean, it's pathetic. And of course, on this Haitian thing, you could do very, very different things with it. But it's interesting to hear your reaction. Amila, go ahead. You're definitely not in Ohio. So tell us what you've got to say here.
Not only am I not in Ohio, I
Why?
don't even know how to pronounce the state, but also I don't even think I've ever actually been there. I've been to many states in the United States, but I don't think I've ever even been to Ohio. But what I wanted to say is that this whole issue, bringing up the cats and the dogs, was a ploy to shift attention from the issues where Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are strong to the issue where Trump is the strongest. His campaign is strongest on immigration. And so right after his disastrous debate, or even before it, they wanted to make sure that people were talking about immigration, because immigration is the one issue, as I said, I'm repeating myself, where the Trump campaign is the strongest. It's a very cynical ploy, but that was really the motivation, in my opinion, and the opinion of other people I respect who've been saying what I'm saying right now.
Well, to me, I don't get the immigration issue. I mean, when you hear a guy named Hannity and a guy named O'Reilly, screaming about immigration, everybody in America, except for a handful of, deep indigenous, has immigrant ancestors.
Including
all
me,
four.
generation.
And I don't get it. I mean,
Well, the reason for it, Harvey, is because that's where they're polling the strongest, not because they're correct. In fact, we need workers, we need immigrants, we need an influx of people to shore up Social Security and take jobs that other people won't take, including in Springfield, where factories were hurting for workers before the Haitians and others came in. It's not because they're correct. It's just because that's where they calculate and perceive that their strength is. When I say they, I mean the Trump campaign, the maggots as they were.
Okay, well, there you have it.
Tatanka, temporary workers in the United States, is that still an ongoing program? You think that wouldn't exist when people would come into the country and they would work, seasonally and then head back to Mexico or wherever they came from? But, the whole idea was to try to maximize that effect. If people want to do that, let them do it. What's wrong, But then, maybe they're going to stay, or people come in this country and overstay their visas all the time. It's a common thing. That's, and then there's the demographic changes out in Columbus where you see different populations have moved in for immigration status or whatever. You had the HB1 visa folks come in where the Republicans wanted to give HB1 visas to people from India. And, we had American workers who couldn't find tech jobs.
Listen, Steve, it's make America white again is what it really is. And they're afraid that the demographic, as you said, is changing. And there's a little bit too much melanoma. I can't even say it. But you know what I mean, that pigment.
LYNN.
At any rate, darker people, they're afraid will be voting Democratic and that they're going to lose control of America. So
well, you did have the same issue or dynamic in the 1840s with the Irish. I mean, if you go back and read what was said about the Irish, it's staggering, but just incredibly brutal. And then, of course, during and after World War I, it was focused on people coming from Eastern Europe and Russia primarily. But you had the wave of Irish and Germans. It was never really aimed at the Germans, ironically. And then around the turn of the 1900, it was aimed at the people from Southern and Eastern Europe, the Greeks, Italians, Russians, and people from Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe. Now, of course, it's from people from Latin America, and the Haitians are, I guess, considered Black. So obviously, you're right, Milo. It's a huge racial situation. Tatanka, although I want to think, by the way, nobody says this, nobody mentions this. Trump's mother was an immigrant. Trump's mother came from England, for God's
Well,
sake.
His predecessor was banned from the town in Germany he went back to, and they said,
Right.
no, you can't come back here. And they kicked him out.
And how
And they
many
came
how
back-
many of his wives are immigrants? One died, the first one.
Oh, yeah. How many
And then-
Republicans are, yeah. pretty funny.
Melania, I mean,
When it's convenient,
Vance's
you know.
wife, for God's sakes. I mean, what are these people thinking? Anyway, go ahead, Tatanka, and then we're going to move on to Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah, I agree with what Mila said about, the distraction factor. It's also because, the Democratic Party did make an attempt to talk about and to get the word out about Project 2025. And of course, Trump wanted to distance himself, and people have a difficult idea of really thinking about structural change. Because what I say about Trump now is he is the useful idiot of the bright right wingers who actually write the words that will become our authoritarian religious-based government if Trump happens to win. He could be gotten rid of after day one. He's a dictator and he gets rid of our Constitution. The Office of Unfortunate Circumstances could just disappear him and appoint somebody else in charge, because this is a long-term agenda of the far right, of the Federalist Society and the neo-Nazis and the KKK. We had Harvey had a guest on here, a woman who wrote Democracy in Chains, Nancy McLean, who did the history on the creation, not of the libertarian philosophy, but the Libertarian Political Party, which was basically bought by the Koch brothers. And its author, James Buchanan, at the end was the one they asserted to, come up with the birther theory on Obama. But basically, this is a long-term movement to create a minority government, because they identify so much with their white skin that when you get more than a majority of non-white voters, they feel threatened by it. So all of this is for that end, and we can't, forget about that, and we can't forget about what Project 2025 would usher in if the Republicans were able to get their way, as Ray has talked about how they're trying to do through Georgia.
Well, it's a terrifying situation. There's no doubt about it. So we shall see. I want briefly, I'm waiting for folks to join us who wanted to talk about energy issues. I know Camilla is with us, but I did want to give Steve CARUSO a moment to talk about the gerrymandering referendum in Ohio and what's been done to it by the state government. Steve, do you want to give us an explanation of what's happened with the gerrymandering referendum in Ohio?
Yeah, so Secretary of State LaRose decided he's going to play with the ballot language and make it seem like the Democrats are subsuming some kind of, for lack of better words, fascist position and taking people's right away to choose their representatives or something like that, which is a total lie, fabrication, and in your face, whatever. So they went to the Supreme Court. Citizens, not politicians, is the name of the group, backing the amendment to get redistricting done by appointed people instead of the politicians who are in office. 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, 5 independents. And that commission will make a decision based on historical past things, proportionality, the whole deal. And Ohio, like you said before, 2015 and 2018 passed laws, trying to get redistricting fair and even and out of the hands of the politicians. And the politicians last time, if we all remember, said, gave the finger to the Ohio Supreme Court, who said, you got to choose these or not. And they almost got charged with contempt. And why they didn't, I don't know. So the language has been changed on the ballot. The referendum's still the same. I'm trying to bring up some of the.
So
info.
basically, the people of Ohio, for the like umpteenth time, have put on the state ballot, and Sandy's in Columbus, she knows about this, is 3 times, have voted to get rid of gerrymandering in Ohio. It's ridiculously gerrymandered, and to have fair districts. The Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court ordered redistricting. The 2 referenda have passed demanding fair redistricting in Ohio, and now there's a ballot measure to get rid of gerrymandering in Ohio, and the Secretary of State has completely poisoned the language that describes the proposition. So the proposition stays the same and would do a reasonably good job of redistricting the state along small d democratic lines, but the Secretary of State has completely altered the description on the ballot. So if you read the description on the ballot, you wouldn't know what's going on. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, so you can see here, I've got the language for that's on the ballot. I downloaded my ballot, copied it off of that, and I can't use it at the polls. We're going to go there and vote, and everything's going to be on the up and up. They're very helpful there. We go vote in person because we don't want to end up getting confused at the precinct where they tell you that they're giving you a paper ballot and then have you vote on the computer with the paper ballot in it, the ballot marking device. Express vote, whatever it is. So the proposed amendment would repeal constitutional protections right off the bat. This is the language that they're using, repeal constitutional protections. No, they're repealing the old laws that the voters put in place that obviously the politicians ignored. So people are smart enough in Ohio, hopefully, and people are making the case. And if you want to copy this, I can send it to you. And if you want to go on reading this, we can go through it if you want.
No, but what you're saying basically is that we have a perfectly good constitutional amendment proposed by the citizens groups in Ohio to make the districts in Ohio be reasonably fair. This is the 3rd time we've done it, and the other 2 passed overwhelmingly. And the legislature intervened to protect their gerrymandered districts. And now we have it again on the ballot, and the Secretary of State has jumped in and made the ballot language. How would you characterize what the ballot language is now like, Steve?
Al, it's definitely an attempt by LaRose to chase people away from the issue and to confuse the issue. People in Ohio have the choice to choose yes or no. If you choose yes, that means you're going to repeal the old statutes that the people voted for and create a new one that hopefully will work this time and get rid of the politicians' involvement in districting. So it's all, the legalese is out there. This is just the ballot language that we're talking about here. The actual issue itself will remain the same, unadulterated by LaRose and whoever else wants to interfere with the will of the people in the state of Ohio.
And mind-boggling. Did anybody want to comment on this before we move ahead? Sandy, you're in Columbus. Oh, wait, you're muted.
There you go. I can talk. Yeah, I had somebody at the door, but real quickly, I don't know if Steve mentioned this, but I put in the chat, it's over 900 words, and it's so chock full of legalese that it doesn't make a lot of sense. Somebody read it and said, this is actually saying the opposite of what we really want. They could have easily entitled it Citizens Not Politicians, is what the campaign was based on, and what the ballot initiative is based on, but they didn't. And talking about taxpayer funded, well, everything with elections is taxpayer funded. So it's, but it's, this is the 3rd campaign that we've done here. And you know, we're really good about getting the word out, and it's just yes on issue 1, all these signs going out. It's a really well-developed campaign. Hope we win.
Well, good luck, and good luck again getting it implemented. I mean, this will be the 3rd time. I assume the polls, you know, Ohio, actually pretty much everywhere. The anti-gerrymandering referenda pretty much always pass. I think there've been 1 or 2 defeated, but whenever they win, and you'll win again in November, let's hope. But then what's going to happen? I mean, is the legislature again going to jump in?
No, they
see
can't
what
this
happened?
time. They
You
can't
see
this
what
time.
happened with the abortion bill. You know, they passed the abortion referendum. It was a constitutional thing, right, Sandy? And then they came out and they said, well, you know, we can't repeal the 6-week ban and we can't do this and we can, well, Secretary of State Yost is all over it like flies on doo-doo. And, you know, come on, grow a pair, LaRose,
Well, you
DeWine,
know,
doing
these guys,
whatever.
okay.
There's no
Well,
law.
Line
you
was-
know,
They can
I
get
can
away
test-
with anything they want, and there's no penalty. So why not? If I can rob a bank every week and there's no
Right.
jail time, there's no consequences, why don't I just keep robbing it? And that's what's happening here with our
Well,
election.
because they'll be out of money, but nonetheless.
John
Anyway,
Brakey.
well, okay, so you'll keep us posted on this. But it is, you know, having lived in Ohio all those years, and I stopped going to the legislature. I lived in Columbus. I could be in the state capitol building in 15 minutes, and somewhere along the line,
On
it
his
became
bike.
like Night of the Living Dead. You know, it was like they had required that all state legislators have a lobotomy. It was just not worth going in there, and it's terrible. And so now you have one.
I don't know, Ohio State House, they're like living in some imaginary country somewhere where everything's all nice and rosy and all these things are going on outside that are just trying to distract them from what this religious experience they're having. Wake up, folks. It's not happening that way. There's reality.
All right,
out
well,
there.
we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Okay, so as promised, there's a piece circulating now. Thank you both for that.
Brakey had a question, I think, real quick. I don't know.
Brakey, John, did you have a hand on this? Oh, wait, you're muted.
muted.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. I had you
No,
unmuted.
you're still muted. No, he can do it. He's the
Okay, I'm
co-host.
unmuted again. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So anyway,
hit the-
I'm involved in this little county called Santa Cruz County, Arizona, and they sued me for asking for public records. Okay. Now the story gets
Wait,
really
repeat that a
bizarre,
minute.
but I gotta tell you.
Wait a minute, John. They sued you because you asked for public records.
Yeah. They were paranoid. They know I'm an investigator. Okay. The county recorder I forced out because she looks like she was rigging the vote by mail. Okay. The county attorney got caught banging a young girl, hired an office and got her pregnant. And then after he won his election, the next one, 10 days later, he had to pay $425,000 to settle the case. Okay. And then when I went in this last time, the county treasurer, well, before I get to the county, that's the big one. That's $40 million. The county assessor got caught taking bribes and the FBI came in. Now that's when I walked in and they knew I was an investigator. And in 2014, I took them on. Okay. But anyway, the big one is the county treasurer stole $40 million over 10 years. And it's just incredible. It's the largest scam by a county. The biggest one ever happened was in Illinois, and it was in Dixon, Illinois, the home of Ronald Reagan. That lady over 20 years stole $53 million. And you know, this suit where they sued me for asking for public records, they didn't sue me in Santa Cruz County. They sued me in Pima. And why'd they sue me in Pima? Because the judges up here are not elected, they're appointed and then retained. In Santa Cruz County, they're elected. I already sued them in 2014. I went in front of a judge down there. They knew about it and they ruled we won the case. They had to pay me $38,000, me and my attorney. But anyway, back on this one, when we did go to court, and we've gone twice on this already because they appealed, the judge said, "What are you doing in my county? Why isn't this in Santa Cruz County?" And then he said, And what are you doing? Suing a requester. It's a requester's right to ask for these records. Your job is to give him the records or give him a statutory reason. You know, when I talk about it's getting hard to get public records, that case is blocking my host state from getting the cast vote record databases. And I want those. And it's just what's going on in this country is very severe. And I hope people look at the links I put there and read this, Professor Pyatt, because it's incredible what could really happen. I'm not kidding when I'm talking about ballots over bullets. Okay.
Well,
We want ballots over
just to
bullets.
repeat, so I'm sure we're sure we're not all on a dangerous drug. You requested records from Santa Cruz County, Arizona,
Yeah.
and the county sued you in Pima County, Arizona.
Plus that they spent $97,000. We just audited them. They owe my attorney $42,000. Okay. And they're complaining and they still say they shouldn't pay and that it's just incredible
That's
the corruption that
mind-boggling.
goes in these small
Mind-boggling.
counties that they're
Well, I'll
afraid
tell
to
you
release
about another
records.
case one of these days. All right, John.
I'll
That's
post
really,
it.
really
The
amazing.
story. I wrote an op-ed on it.
It's truly, well, let's see it. Send it out, please.
I will.
Steve, it's truly amazing that a Secretary of State can swoop in and completely, mess up the description on a ballot initiative in the state ballot. I mean, that's also mind-boggling. All right.
We worked on a bill 4 times. The governor vetoed the first one, and then the megas, and then with Ken Bennett, look what they did to him. This thing is so bad, they eat their own. He's a principal guy. They spent $340,000 to take his seat.
Wow.
And he spent
okay.
9. It's incredible what's happening.
Incredible.
But you know what I believe? This could be the last stand, because when you listen to this Professor paper in this webinar I posted, he explains where all of this is coming from. And I do believe that, he talks about by 2035, this country will no longer be called just a literally white country. It's going to be multiracial, and that's what it is.
Well, we know demographically the studies indicate that somewhere between 2040 and 2050, the United States will no longer be a white majority.
Well, he says 2035, and he's really good on statistics.
That's been on the demographic books for quite a while.
Exactly.
Marcielle, you're going to keep your hand on this. And
I think just one other thing I want to add, since I got you. I've been doing this for 20 years. Republicans fight fire with fire. If they believe that fraud's going on, they will. I know from the work I did 20 years ago with other people that the first rigging that was happening by the machines was happening to the Republicans, that they were stacking the deck and moving things around and controlling. That's why we have. There's a lot of Republicans out there. That's why I think Trump's going to lose, because they're afraid to say they're not going to vote for him.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens with the polls.
Rat in a corner, okay? And he is going to be desperate. He's going to fire up people, and it's going to get violent.
Well, let's hope you're wrong about that. Tatanka,
I hope I am too.
That's why I put your name, Robert.
We're going to talk the ceiling with facts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. We're going to talk about Robert Kennedy in a minute, and then about 3 Mile Island. Tatanka, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say something a little different. But when I get into this, we're all political here, and I get weary with the polarization and with, dealing with the Republican Party as it is. I really get bogged down. And I was hearing George Lakey, who was one of the principal architects of nonviolence in our country. He said something I want to pass on about the time we're in. And he wrote a book called Viking Economics, and how Denmark and Norway and Iceland came out with the incredible social democratic governments they have, and the process that they used in pre and during World War II in the fight against the Nazis, a time of great polarization, and that beauty came out of that. Then he He went to the 30s in our country and all the polarization between organized labor and workers being shot down and everything in the 30s. And what we got was FDR and a lot of great stuff, right? And then the 60s, same kind of polarization. And he says, I was looking for a way to talk about the positive benefits of this, that we've incarnated a time of great possibility. And he said, I met this welder who is when you make art from metal, what's it called? Sculptor. He does art sculpture with metal. And he saw his home and he was just in tears about the beauty of what was created. And he said, how do you get metal to come out that beautiful? And he took him, walked him out, and he took him to the forge and with the anvil. And he said, there it is. That's it. I heat it up, white hot, heat it up, and it melts. And then it doesn't care what I make of it. When it melts, I make this. And he said, that's it. That's it. So he likes to remind us that in these times where everything gets so heated and so violent, right? That it's a time where our society kind of melts down, and it's up to us to actually take that. And it's the possibility of the greatest change. That's why we're all here on this call. We want something incredibly positive to come out of it. And he's saying this is why, this is the time we're in, and this is why we can do it. That the society becomes so malleable to whatever our thought and emotions. If we're in integrity and we move together and we build in our unity, amazing things can happen. So I hold on to that when I get down.
Well, one thing we have to remember about this election is that it is actually significant in a multi-century, multi-millennial way, in that, you know, the world has been run for many thousands of years by white men. And suddenly we're looking at a situation where an election could make the most powerful person in the world a woman of color. It doesn't get any deeper than that. You know, it's really hard, it's really easy to kind of gloss over the depth of the demographic that's involved with this election. But to have we had Hillary run and she won, but they didn't let her be president. But we're in a situation now where the most powerful person in the world could become not only a woman, but a woman of color. I mean, it just doesn't get any deeper than that. So we really need to put this thing in perspective, and it is white hot, and it's a very big deal. And Trump is the perfect foil for the last white guy to run the world. I will say, if you're looking for signs, I was deeply encouraged by the fact that the Fed dropped the interest rate. That is a very big deal, because it does mean that the economy is likely in the next 30 to 60 days to, go up and be stronger. And it wasn't just a quarter point, it was a half. And the market will go up, and we'll see what the other indicators are. But what we're talking about here, the one thing we have to remember, and I just wrote a piece about this, is that the polls can show whatever they show. But if people don't get ballots, and if the ballots aren't counted, the polls don't matter for anything. And so that's what we're doing. That's the work of our calls here, and having a Ray McClendon and John Brakey on with us. That's the core. Coming next week, I'm gonna try and get more people from other states, so we can discuss the situation.
And Harvey, one more
Yeah.
thing I just want to say. Also, when I get down, Dolores Huerta has a favorite phrase, which we've talked about throughout the movement of the farm workers and other movements. And she says, there are moments in a movement when we all think we've lost, we've actually already won, and we don't realize it yet.
Well,
we may hit that point in the neck between now and November 22nd. We may hit that, January. We may hit that point where we're so down, but we have to finish it all the way through, because, that happens.
Well, then we'll all bow down and thank Taylor Swift. Camilla, I know you're waiting, but our buddy Dave Saltman wants to jump in here. David, Let's hear it.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything today, but I was just fascinated by what Tatanka was saying about. I've been in these metal forges. You know, the temperature gets up to like 3,000 degrees. I mean, that's the temperature where iron melts. I mean, it is blazing hot. Hot isn't even the word. Anyway, and Harvey, what you were saying about women of color. I noticed that there's a lot of two shots now with showing Kamala and Donald Trump side by side. And I looked at them both and I thought, you know, in actual color, they're almost exactly the same. And I'm looking at you two guys, neither one of you is white. And I say this, Harvey, you and I have had this discussion before. I spent a lot of time in Brazil. And in Brazil is famous for racial tolerance, okay? And so I was interested in how they saw race in Brazil. And what I discovered was something that I found as an American, first of all, completely mind-blowing and absolutely fascinating. And I wonder if this could be the outcome of the blazing hot furnace of right now. Here's what they have, how they think in Brazil. They are much more tolerant than we are, but they're still racist in their own way. And in Brazil, to be considered a person that we would consider black, like you're saying Kamala Harris, you know, classic woman of color. To Brazilians, she's not black at all. She would be called so the Brazilians have 75 different words, for each one describing an exact different shade of coloration. She might be called canela, which means cinnamon colored or something like that. They're prejudiced against blacks, yes. But to be considered black in Brazil, you have to be as black as my shirt. You can't be any other color. Any other color is not black. So it's just the opposite. It's the one drop of blood, American one drop of blood law, but the opposite. In America, if you have one drop of black blood, you're black. In Brazil, if you have one drop of white blood, you're not black. And it's the same people, it's the same life. It's 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. But it's all bullshit, this race thing. It's all in your mind. It's
Okay, we're going off on the radio.
let's
watch your mouth a little bit. Thanks.
I'm sorry, my mistake. I didn't mean to say that. But anyway, that's all I got.
Well, as you speak from experience, having been married to a Brazilian woman, right?
I got this at a very high cost.
We all know race is a social construct. So we don't have to go there now. That's a great conversation to have.
Well, race was essentially invented by the Europeans in the 14 and 1500s to justify taking the land and enslaving people. The race is a totally recent invented concept from 14, 1500s, 500-600 years ago.
Brazil was conquered by the Portuguese. That's exactly right.
So there you go. My wife wants to know, we've forgotten about Geraldine Ferraro, and a great Italian name, right?
Died on the sword for what?
Yeah, well, there you go. So, all right, well, listen, this has been a great conversation. We now want to turn to another a great part of our culture, which is the Kennedys. And there's a piece circulating. Now, I was expecting some folks, David Swanson maybe, to come on and talk. There's one number on here I don't recognize, 772. If you're here to talk about 3 Mile Island, and your area code is 772, go ahead. Otherwise, none of the people I thought were going to come on to talk about it have. But Camilla, who's True Like Ice Like Fire, and if anybody can identify that song by Bob Dylan, go ahead. True Like Ice Like Fire. There's a piece circulating on the internet today about Bobby Kennedy and his position on wind power. And by way of disclosure, I met Bobby Kennedy, I think in 2010 it was. I spoke at the Riverkeepers Conference. Oh, there it is. There's the piece. It's on Inside Climate News. And I spoke at his organization, the Riverkeepers. They had a conference in San Francisco. It was so much fun. And the day before, Bobby Kennedy and I walked together in the Marin Headlands and talked for about 2 hours. It was an amazing experience. I had never met him before. Actually, no, I had met him before. He spoke in Columbus at the Hillel, and he identified me in the audience. And then we went to dinner with the kids. He wanted me to go out with him to cover, with him, with the younger students. And then I'll never forget this. I took him back to his hotel. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and he had arranged, as only a Kennedy could, to have them keep open the weight room so that we could go in and work out. And I went in and worked out with him, and he showed me all this stuff that his brother-in-law, Arnold Schwarzenegger, had shown him. I learned some really great stuff, with Bobby in the weight room. And then I persuaded him to write the introduction to my book, Solartopia, which he did. And, in this current election, he hasn't had much to say about the environment. And he was just attacked in this piece by, I don't know the writer, for having been an opponent of wind power. And as someone who spent a fair amount of time on Martha's Vineyard, I know that he was instrumental in preventing an offshore wind farm from being built. It was called Vineyard Wind, and that never got done, although I think they're building it now. And Camilla wanted to say some things. This piece highly uncomplimentary to Bobby Kennedy. And Camilla, what did you want to tell us about your feelings about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm driving, so I really shouldn't be talking to you at all, but I put my comments in the chat. But basically, they're really after Kennedy right now from many different directions because they're trying to undermine Trump. So one of his strongest suits is his decades of career as an environmental lawyer. So they're making it look like, oh, he's not really an environmental. So of course he is an environmentalist, but he has legitimate concerns about wind, and he's a truth teller. He wants to hear people out, and there really are serious issues to the ecosystem, to the whales, to humans on land. I have personally been to a wind farm and measured the environment where humans were living nearby, like deathly ill. From there are many different. There are the infrasound. There's the I don't need to go into it all. And you could find a better expert on it than me, but which I could point you to if you want. But there's nothing wrong with him being against wind, and it doesn't mean that he's not pro-solar. I think it's just a big hit piece.
Okay. I see you just put your thing. Yeah, if you're driving, well, you don't use the camera. And so you're raising issues about wind power and supporting Bobby here.
Yeah, Bill McKibben quoted throughout that article. I think it's the Democrats trying to influence to delegitimize Kennedy because he's allied now with Trump. That's what it looks like to me.
Okay.
Just like they're after him for this supposed relationship with the journalist. You've probably heard about that too in the past couple of days.
Right. Okay. Did anybody else want to speak up on Bobby Kennedy? I also want to go talk about Solarizing Los Angeles. Okay, Camilla. Well, we thank you for that opinion. I don't know if no one wants to really engage you at this point on that. It's a certainly an interesting point of view. I was involved with the wind business. I actually tried to sell windmills to farmers in northern Ohio. And I still think it would have been a great thing. It was killed by the Ohio legislature, I think wrongly. All of Ohio now, between Lake Erie and the North Coast, where the wind is very attractive in many ways, that most or all of Ohio can now be powered with wind power. And I think it would have been a good thing. I have seen indications of health impacts from among people who live close to the windmills, maybe too close, but they're still up for grabs. And I have yet to see convincing evidence that offshore windmills cause problems. And the argument could be made, but to me, I support offshore wind and I support onshore wind, although I do believe that people should live a certain distance from the towers. Mike Hirsch, you have a hand?
Yeah, I think that Bobby Kennedy's main complaint about wind had to do with the view at Martha's Vineyard. He thought that it would obstruct the view. I remember I was on Cape Cod when a lot of those things were going down, and it was quite a controversy. And Bobby Kennedy Jr. had a very good reputation at that point, and a lot of the anti-environmental forces jumped all over it and said, look, even Bobby Kennedy doesn't support wind. And they used that to pummel wind and bring forth fracking and, offshore drilling, which obviously has much more of a risk than wind does. So, but, I don't want to paint with a broad brush. And Bobby Kennedy did a whole lot of great things, including introducing your books logo. But But it's possible for even a very bright person and a well-meaning principled person to be wrong. And he's been wrong on vaccines a number of times. He's spoken recklessly. He's denied saying things, and then people had videotape of him saying things. And in terms of him running around with women, a lot of powerful, famous men have that proclivity, and I don't think he's even denied it. So I think that we really need to not get suckered into, the only reason they're picking on him is because he's cozying up to Trump. Well, that's a very good reason to pick on him, because he's cozying up to Trump. But that said, nobody's perfect. Bobby Kennedy is certainly not perfect. I admire a lot of the things that he's done. And I think that he's been a voice in the wilderness in a lot of issues. That said, he's also done some things that I strongly disagree with, including endorsing Trump.
Camilla, don't drive off the road. Be careful, please. Did you want to respond, Camilla? I don't know if you could hear it. Thank you for that, Mike. Okay. Well, listen, I do want to turn, if Camilla comes back, I hope she says safe. That's why we don't have people driving in their car and talking on the phone, because if they hang up, now we all gotta, it's tourists here to wonder. I hope she's okay. Marilyn Bernstein.
I just gotta tell you that they did put up a bunch of windmills by the vineyard. They're not online yet, and one of them, the things that spin around fell off and disintegrated.
Oh yeah, a blade. They lost a blade off one of the windmills.
Fell in a lot of pieces, and they've been cleaning it up for a month or so now.
Yeah. Well, listen, at least it's not plutonium.
I'm glad they're building it, but I'm worried about that part of it.
Well, I remain, after all these years, I remain a very strong supporter personally of offshore wind. One of the things I'm really supporting, and we're joined, by the way, by a really great environmentalist, and I'm very happy to introduce her, Bonnie, let's call you Bonnie Raitt, Bonnie Nixon, but hold on a minute here. One of the things I really look forward to is that in the Pacific, on the same latitude as San Luis Obispo, where the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant is, offshore, there are very, very strong winds. And I want to see a giant wind array in the Pacific Ocean, offshore, on the same level as Diablo Canyon. and have that electricity from that giant wind farm pour into the switching station at Diablo Canyon. So that we can shut Diablo Canyon off and have it instantly replaced with the electricity coming in from offshore. All right, Camilla, thank you very much. If there's more, please jump in. We're now joined, by the way, it's exactly 4 o'clock Pacific time. I presume it's 7 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to go another 20 minutes. I met Bonnie Nixon, who you can see here, most of you, exactly the way you would want to meet anybody, which is that we were at a Bonnie Raitt concert in Thousand Oaks, and Bonnie called me out because we worked together on nuclear power, which is always a thrill to be at a Bonnie Raitt concert and have her call you out. And I raised my hand and stood up like a very humble activist would do. And the woman right behind me was this one, Bonnie Nixon. And Bonnie knew that I fought nuclear power from Bonnie Raitt's shout out, they call it. It's a shout out. And Bonnie had been at 3 Mile Island at Penn State in the middle of the accident. And it turns out that Bonnie Nixon here is an incredible position. Now, we are starting a campaign, and there is a beautiful presentation. I wrote an article about this and posted it at Howie Klein's wonderful downwithtyranny.com website. And we are calling for all of Los Angeles to be solarized by the summer of 2028, which is when the Olympics will come. LA will be the 3rd city to have 3 Olympics. London and Paris have each had 3 Olympics. In 2028, it will be 3 for LA. 1930, that's the official logo. 1932, 1984, and now 2028. And we want these Olympics to be 100% solarized, which can be done. I mean, actually, the Olympics themselves, and they're going to reuse, I believe, 1 or 2 of the sites from 1984. The Olympics themselves only involve about a dozen locations, one of which will be SoFi Field, which is new. It's a football stadium. They're actually going to use it for swimming, amazingly enough. And much of SoFi is already solarized. But we want, by 2028, solar panels on every appropriate rooftop in Los Angeles. Now, Bonnie, I'm going to actually, I can't even begin to describe. Bonnie's resume is incredible. She has PhD, all sorts of degrees, incredible experience as an environmentalist. But what is your current position, Bonnie Nixon? I know you're standing up, but other than that.
Yeah, no, I'm not standing. I'm sitting.
Okay, you're sitting.
My current position is, I mean, it's a couple of different positions, to tell you the truth. I'm the director of sustainability at the Long Beach Container Terminal, which is the largest automated terminal in America, and certainly in the San Pedro Port Complex. So if you were to go to the San Pedro Port, obviously you all know that, you know, it is a source of pollution for the Los Angeles region, as is sort of the Bakersfield area. Those are the 2 most severe non-attainment zones in Southern California. And those are created by a lot of the diesel combustion and the diesel usage of everything from the ships to the trucks to the cargo handling equipment to the train locomotives to the tugs, and to just all of the movement of the congestion between the Central Valley and the port areas. So we are working very hard to to be a true net zero terminal by 2030. So we're already 85–90% of the way there because of the $2.5 billion investment we've made, and we're about to spend another $250 million with the help of some federal and state grants to turn over the remainder of all of the equipment to electric. So, you know, we're also looking at putting a solar installation on top of every feasible roof. Now, remember, it is an industrial site, so you don't have a lot of rooftop space. Over all of our parking lots are already solar panels, and we'll put renewable or distributed generation as well for resiliency purposes. So that's my current role at my full-time day job. I'm also a professor at UCLA, just recently at Harvard, and next year at USC, specifically teaching supply chain sustainability, where I help people to see the effects of extraction all over the planet, whether that be mining, emissions, the bioaccumulation of non-biodegradable matter, such as landfills that hold rubber and cement and asphalt, things that don't break down. And then, of course, the actual deforestation too. And so we're focused on how do you look at products and buy them differently? How do you think about everything you buy and the extraction that's taking place in order to get it to you? And so that's largely my focus. I mean, it's very much focused on climate change, but also labor exploitation around the planet as well. And I have an advisory services where I help boards and different entities strategize on their decarbonization and labor exploitation issues.
But it's just to briefly make it clear to you, Bonnie, among other things, is in charge of a $250 million project to finish solarizing or making green the port of Los Angeles / San Pedro, where 40% of the imported goods coming into the US pass. And so thanks to her work, at the end of a certain period of time, the port of Los Angeles, San Pedro, is going to be green, totally green.
Yeah.
And we want to, of course, expand this to do the whole city of Los Angeles, where there are God knows how many square miles of usable rooftops to put solar panels, so that Los Angeles can be the world's first totally solarized city, and where we can charge all the electric vehicles. We can cover the aqueducts so that the water doesn't evaporate, and do all these other things. And this is Bonnie Nixon here is not someone who, goes out and gives speeches that don't go anywhere. This is the nitty gritty here. Oh, that's Bonnie Raitt when she was
Yeah. And then
18.
at the time, I think what's important also, I work with a lot of young people or people that are discouraged. They come out of their companies, their large companies. That's a lot of the people who come to my courses. And I mean, purpose is so critical. And I think a lot of times people feel that, how can they make change happen? How can they make policy change? How can they move these major corporations or major governments? And I'm a real believer that, if you take your neck of the woods or your piece of the corner and make a change, and first that could start with your house and your household, and then it starts with your neighborhood or your local community, and that you just keep going, you get a sense of purpose. That's what happened for me at Penn State. Was I was actually going to be a lawyer on social justice issues, and then 3 Mile Island happened, and it was like, whoa, I have to pay attention to where are we getting our energy from? Where are we getting our power from? And why is this our solution? And how could we put ourselves in a situation where all of our lives and our land and all the animals and the plants and everything are threatened in one fell swoop? So that was a real wake-up call for me. And I've never turned back since. I've been 43 years working on all aspects of the environment through the 20 years with the public sector on everything from high-speed rail in the state to deregulation of water and utilities or power utilities to the water issues up and down the state. And so, solar is a no-brainer. I mean, the renewables are here and they're here to stay, and they've gotten cheaper over these years. And there's really no excuse for us not to be driving electric cars, for us not to have solar vehicles, for us not to try and motivate our local communities and not, we could talk all about the environment with some of them who may believe it's a climate hoax or not believe in it. But the real conversation is about the money it saves, the quality of life it improves. And you know, I mean, I've had an electric car now for 2.5 years, and I haven't taken it to the shop once. You know, whereas I
Right.
used to take my car every 4 or 5 months and spend $500 to $1,000. And the electricity is much cheaper, and that's cheaper in the home as well. And so I think we have to stop putting up. I just came off of a call where this gentleman, the whole group of organizations came together and they had a mural board and everybody was trying to find and brainstorm solutions. And you had one gentleman who just continuously kept saying every problem and every challenge and every reason it couldn't happen and every obstacle. And I think, you know, we're better than that. We need to just jump over those challenges and just get it done.
Well, I would assume also, Steve CARUSO will get to you in a minute, but I would assume also that if the Port of LA and San Pedro is going to put up $250 million to finish the job of solarization, that there's going to be a payback. I mean, there'll be a return on investment. They will save back that money at some point, right?
Yeah. So if they're gonna, there's no question about it. Well, that's and that's not the 250 million that we're putting up is mostly for putting in all new infrastructure for the conduit and switchgear box, and then bringing in the chargers and the electric equipment. The electric equipment is 3, 4, 5, 6 times the price, and that's in large cargo heavy handling equipment. And that's just happens to be because we're in the early stages of it. It's kind of like the Sony Walkman phenomenon where they could charge more because the demand was high. But the solar is just a small piece of that for us on our terminal, and we will get it done. And I can't speak as much, to be honest with you. I live in San Pedro, so I am in the Port of LA's jurisdiction as well as the City of LA's jurisdiction, and I care a lot about what's being done. And to be honest, I see it's kind of what I was just talking about. Every time I ask, like, why aren't we bringing more electrification, substation capacity to the port, or improving the utilities, even where I live in San Pedro, I hear all the problems associated with LADWP, which is a municipal utility. My work is located in SCE territory, which is a deregulated utility. Okay, there are 3 utilities in the state of California, and that's PG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric, and Southern California Edison. And they operate more like businesses. So when you say you want something and you're willing to pay for it in a rate case, you get it. That is not so much the case with municipal and fully regulated utilities. So I think it's important to understand some of the business models that we create that sometimes just act as a barrier or an obstacle, you know. So we need to work with our policymakers and with our government agencies to put programs in place that incentivize this proper behavior. You know,
Well, it's amazing what you do and what you're doing, Bonnie. It's phenomenal. And I do want to mention that we will probably discuss this next week. You mentioned 3 Mile Island. They're now talking about reopening Unit 1 at 3 Mile Island, which opened first in 1974, a mere 50 years ago. And, you know, they said they're going to do it for $1.5 billion. That's ridiculous. And, you know, they're going to do it in 2 years. That's ridiculous. And it'll never pay for itself. And you wonder what kind of psychosis these people working on. And it's really great to meet someone like you who's in the middle of a giant industrial facility that's doing what needs to be done. And you're just a great hero.
well, and
Steve,
I think I
go ahead.
appreciate that, Harvey. And I believe that it does just take financial investment and commitment. And I don't say that lightly. I know that the financial investment is significant, but there are billions, if not trillions of dollars out there, you know, that can and will be unlocked if we make the right decisions. When you hear about things like, you know, TMI opening again, or, what some of the politicians on the drill baby drill and bringing back pipelines and all these things. I mean, these are sort of these last ditch efforts to convince people who don't, who aren't willing to go study some of the facts and do the research, that this is the simplest way for us to get energy, and we need to be energy independent. I don't disagree that we need to move towards more energy independence, but that can be done with renewables much more responsibly. We've already been experiencing the world and the land created by fossil fuels. It's here, and we're experiencing it every day with every climate catastrophe. And so if people want more of the same, under the guise that it's going to save their economy or keep them more resilient, then, they only have to look back at the effects and the impacts of the past decisions we've made.
Right. Well, I call it the VC Summer syndrome. VC Summer is a nuclear 2-reactor complex that they set out to build in South Carolina, and they spent $9 billion and gave up. And there's 2 big holes in the ground where they're building these 2 reactors, $9 billion down the toilet. They'll never get an electron of electricity from that place. The great news of our era is that solar works and it's cheaper, and what you're doing is phenomenal, Bonnie. We're almost out of time. I'm really glad you joined us. Thank you so much. Steve Caruso.
Yeah, Bonnie, nice to meet you. Are
Yes.
you related to Richard by any chance? Sorry.
No.
Okay. Richard's dad grew up in Columbus, or drove electric trolley in Columbus, and then moved to California. That's why I had to ask that. I
Okay.
actually stayed in the Navy dormitory. They were renting it out for people living on the streets, so I had a bed there in LA. And then canned Valvoline grease at Bakersfield at their factory over there back in the mid-70s. So long story short, hemp as an alternative to diesel. They have biodiesel hemp. There's no infrastructure. Sounds like skipping from diesel to electric is a big leap, but maybe that's the wisest way to go, using hemp diesel. They can also use hemp diesel in airplanes as well, and it burns 125 degrees cooler than it would normally with regular diesel, from what I'm reading.
Yeah.
No
And
thoughts
it's
on that bad idea?
Yeah, and it's more expensive. I mean, ultimately, we do see that, it's costing more to run, run a lot of, or it costed more to run it getting diesel fuel every single day than it does to electrify it. And to electrify solar, wind, we're seeing, the Port of Long Beach has a huge project underway, Pier Wind, and I work with Altamira in San Pedro here, and they're an incubator that's looking at all kinds of other sources, from other sources of fuel, from hydrogen to ammonia to e-methanol that comes from feedstocks. We have plenty of feedstock here, and we need to be smart about these next choices. But I am an absolute believer that every possible roof we can put solar on, we should be, and not just only going from here to the end of across the entire West, along all our deserts. We've got to start getting creative and putting it on all the roofs of our buildings as well.
We
Right.
just
Well,
had
it kills me that they're actually cutting down Joshua trees outside of LA to put in solar panels, when trees are the ultimate solar collectors. They're
Exactly.
the last thing we should be cutting down for
Well,
solar.
and the trees, and they don't, and similarly, like, it's like there's some thought or belief that the desert's flora and fauna aren't equally as important. Those cactuses, I mean, do you know that if you were to go to Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, not to suggest that, I mean, that's an example of what it becomes when you've got just, completely dry and sand, but they are building buildings mimicking the cactuses, that have grown in the desert environments, because they know how to retain water and keep cool. So it's like I believe in of an idea that's created by a woman named Janine Benris called biomimicry, where if we just mimicked nature's been doing it right for 40 million years. And we get here for a few thousand and we're already destroying it. And nature has so many lessons to give us on how to run things and how to design things and how to regenerate and restore, the damage we've done and repair the damage we've done. So I highly recommend people look at her book, Biomimicry, as well.
What's her last name?
Janine Benrus. It's Benyrus. She's a biologist and quite brilliant.
Well, you're quite brilliant. Bonnie, it's great to have you on with us. Really an honor, and it's mind-boggling what you're doing. And we will work with you. You're going to be part of the Solartopian Olympics Committee, and we're going to be gearing up to write the committee and tell them what we want and get the city council and get these rooftops covered in LA and convert the vehicle fleet here to all electric. So it's great to hear from you. We're at 4:20, which is when we usually sign off. Thank you, Steve, for engineering, Mike Hirsch, everybody else for participating. Camilla, this was another mind-boggling session. Jeez. And, we still have, we got 29 people. We have the longest attention span of any gathering in America. So listen, everybody, thank you so much. Bonnie, you'll be a regular guest, I hope. And we will be back next week. We're going to find out what's going on in other states. We certainly got an earful from John Brakey and Ray McClendon on Arizona and Georgia today, and we'll fill in the blanks coming up. So everybody, thank you so much. No nukes, everybody, and we will see you at the Solartopian Olympics in LA 2028. And Bonnie, you'll be throwing the discus.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. No nukes. See you next week.